good evening, one and all. I'm going to be doing something a little different tonight. I'm not going to go into the specifics of what the project is for this evening, but we'll be doing some different type of artwork and just trying to capture a bit of a style, but also trying to get used to using this a little bit every day. This is something I did the other day. I want to try and do something similar. All right. We'll be doing some other things as well, depending on how long the stream goes. This is going to be... we'll go on for as long as kind of feel like. I forgot to do one last thing. Stand by. Double checking the audio as well, because we've had fewer problems, but they still exist every now and again. All right, we're good. Good on the audio. All right. It is warm right now. Summer. The summer temperatures of being in the high 70s. Not used to these temperatures, but man, is it beautiful right now. Some of the most beautiful weather that you can have for summer is up here in Alaska. But it doesn't last for very long. It's really beautiful weather for about 3 weeks. Then it starts changing. We're at the tail end of those 3 weeks, I think. The other day there was a cool breeze that took place. And it just reminded us that the weather is starting to change ever so slightly. All right. I came across this brush a while back. I've never tried to use it. It's actually a really neat sort of idea. It changes the shade a little bit each time, and yeah, could add some interesting things for the concept phase. All right, so we want to start off with Something like this. We're going to be drawing a whale in the style of Native Alaskan art. But we're going to draw it like it's an actual creature. This could get interesting. I did one of these the other day, and it turned out looking pretty good. Not a whale, it was actually another animal, Alaskan animal that was done in native Alaskan art style. And it turned out decent. I've drawn this style a bit in the past. Turns out when you're making logos, a lot of people want to have some of this flair put into some of the designs, but I've yet to actually have someone select one of those designs. I don't know where a lot of their inspiration comes from, but there's definitely there's a lot of lore, I would say, or mythology behind the shapes that are chosen. But I have no idea as to the backstory. I can kind of guess, based upon some of the elements, that I think that they're supposed to represent parts of the animal. So you'll see designs where it has like multiple consecutive rings, and but they're in like perfect arches. And it's actually supposed to try and symbolize like bone or something like that. Or another one where it's supposed to be the symbolism of an eye, but it's in a different place than it would typically be found. Some very interesting styles out there. This shouldn't take too terribly long. We're going to be doing some other artwork after this, but this is like our warm-up sketch for today. Now, there's a type of art for Alaskans that I'm not sure where the origins of it comes from, but it incorporates very human-like teeth for some of the creatures, and I don't know again where this mythology comes from. I think it might have been just easy for them to be able to create the design rather than have to go with a different go with like the actual animal teeth. But I've been thinking about it, and I think there might be another reason for it, and it might be that it's supposed to represent a different type of animal in some cases than what is supposed to be than what they see. Or it could be a reference to showing the spirit of an animal behind a person. I don't know. But there's definitely something there. So if these teeth look out of place, it's because it's a cultural piece of art that that I don't know the backstory for. Time to get rid of the color mixing on this. Last night I was setting up a render for one of the more difficult scenes for the current short, and I was having trouble with the glass. Now, if you've rendered stuff in Blender, you know that glass is a nightmare, and I encountered that, and I do not have very good tips or tricks on how to create good renders of glass without it flickering, and other than to up the sampling. So I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I don't know what it is. I look for tutorials, and there's not a whole lot out there to be able to give good reference for this particular situation. This is a moment where I wish that I was on a team of people that had like more experience than myself, so I could be able to go up and ask them how they would resolve something like that. But I do not have that. Most people don't have that, and it got me thinking about the importance of being able to be in a work environment. See, you work better in a team, and it may not feel like that at times. And there's definitely a lot of times where you do not work well in a team, and it's better to go solo. But I am realizing just how important it is for teams to exist. And in situations like this, where you need a mentor, that's something where you would figure it out from the reference of someone else, or you as a team would figure it out, and then you would have documentation for it moving forward. Whereas for me, I'm making my own documentation in that sense, and that doesn't really pan out very well. It means you spend a whole lot of time troubleshooting things by yourself, and you don't have the chance to be able to tag team with folks on it. So thus, did you come up with the best solution? Who knows? But if you have a group of people, then you can choose the best options from the group, and then you can move forward. Definitely one of the more bizarre pieces of artwork that I've done. This is based upon a a collection of native artwork. And I know that in some cases you have to get like special permission to use certain types of artwork. Stylizing stuff like this is definitely not a violation of that, but I do know that there's some folks where they have very famous pieces of artwork that you can find around the state. I actually got to see an area where they had the originals kept at a museum. And it is very interesting to see that stuff. But I would say that there's a lot of the artwork that... There's a lot of really good artwork. There's also a lot of artwork that is very kind of targeted towards Alaskans. And so thus, if you tried to take it outside the state, I'm not sure how many people would quite get it. And even living in the state for this long, even there's a couple of things that I still don't get. But I have noticed some pieces of artwork that I have grown more appreciation for because I've gotten to see it so much, and I've gotten to see its place in the culture up here. By the way, there are some very curious pieces of Alaskan artwork out there. There was one that looked surprisingly similar to a Bigfoot. I saw it a couple of years back, and gotta say, it's pretty compelling. That teeth, the teeth there really makes it look pretty pretty odd. Hopefully the rest of it starts to make it feel a little bit more natural. Last time I did this, like I said, it actually turned out pretty well. So I have no idea if this will work or not. And actually, I kind of like that called Snow White brush. I kind of like the style for coming up with a shape and then using the black outline, because it doesn't, you know, where the separation is. Let's see here. I want to have him. That's too much of an arc. Let's go with that. I know there's some people, they'll make some artwork that is related to stuff in their culture, and some of it actually causes a couple of problems. And Alaskan artwork, there are actually a couple of people, when they see it, like actual native artwork, not mine, some of it doesn't mesh very well. I mean, we like to think that we're a fairly tolerant society, but when it comes to native artwork, I know that there are a lot of people in this world that get a knee-jerk reaction to it and lash out, because a lot of native artwork does incorporate parts of animals. So if you see a design, there actually might be actual bone in it, or there might be fur, there might be some other form of like dried skin. And so to some people, that does become a triggering point. And in that sense, I don't know if getting them introduced to the artwork earlier would help, but I definitely know that there is a group of people online that do not really appreciate the style that is out there. Mostly because they come from a world that is very that finds it very distasteful. That's one of the reasons why I kind of been tinkering with this sort of style for a couple of years now, trying to see if there's a way to capture some of the artwork that Native Alaskans have up here and try and give it a design that kind of translates maybe to a more modern sort of interpretation. Anyway, the reason why I'm tinkering on it. Reading is there, Breath of Edits, who says, "I'm back." How you doing? What has your Thursday and start of your Friday been like? The thing I mentioned earlier about there being like bones incorporated into some of the designs. This one right here is one of those parts where you see it in a lot of the local artwork, and we're adding that onto the side here. Good, just school. Dandy. The there is a lot of times that I remember fighting with schoolwork. And I would resort to doing a lot of drawing in that meantime. I spent more time drawing than working on classes, sadly. Well, sadly, depending on how you look at it. Professors were saddened by it. But I learned a lot in the process, so. Although I must say that some of my favorite classes were the ones where you had to try and study and troubleshoot a solution, because it was considered like a puzzle. You're overcoming a puzzle, and if it didn't have that puzzle aspect, it didn't quite capture my attention the same way. How do you get so much free time? Well, it depends on what sort of free time you're looking for. Now, for me, when I was at college, which again was many years ago, a lot of my schoolwork was actually relatively straightforward and easy to do. And this was before we had all the AI nonsense that's been going into school, and so everything was required a whole lot of just brute forcing and head knowledge to try and figure stuff out. And once you got the basics, it got easier and easier. But I also didn't study as much as the average person. If I was to give like an actual chart of the amount of time I spent doing classes, this is what it would have been like. All right, so let's put out here the timeline. So this was my average school day. Right here, you would be getting up in the morning, and so we'll color that in white. Why is that not? Oh, here we go. We'll color that in white. There we go. The amount of time I spent eating, we'll put that in kind of this green color right here. So we eat, and eat. So 3 meals a day. I spent about this much time in one class, spent about that much time in a second class, a third class, and usually there was a break right there, and maybe there was something else that happened in the evening, of which my day would incorporate doing studying or side stuff, and then there would be studying over here. But then I had a lot of other stuff over here, which I will put in blue. And this right here was the free time. Now, some people would go to like the local town. Other people would go to events. Other people would watch movies. And this is where I found most of my time for projects. Some people spend it on extra studying. And unfortunately, as time went on, this started becoming more project time than actual class and like study time. So was it the smart thing to do? It depends on who you are. For me, it was the smart thing, but it was because I actually intended to do more work. And a lot of the classwork wasn't actually preparing me for the workforce. So I was learning based upon what I was hearing other people kind of dealing with. And so I made my decision. Interestingly enough, it actually panned out. For myself, it was more important that I learned the techniques. And if classes weren't teaching me the techniques, then I needed to find a different way to get them. And that's where I started utilizing projects to try and figure that stuff out. Of which some of my best projects were side projects that I turned into class projects, including one where it impressed the professor so much that he actually highlighted it for what students could learn through the school. And I didn't learn it in any of the classes. So it was kind of, it was an honor to get to see it there, but it also was funny to realize that it wasn't true. I did it for my own project. And that's something they don't teach you at college. They don't teach you how these things are going to be used in the future. Why do you need to learn like this certain equation over and over again? Which, by the way, I like math. And so I'm not trying to diss math or anything, but there's a lot of math equations that were not very beneficial, and we would skip over the ones that I ended up using for the majority of my adult life. So we'd be focusing on quadratic equations, but I've never used them. But I've used other types of equations all the time. And so I find it kind of funny how that panned out. But you have to have a foundation on that stuff. But when you get to college, I think the foundation stuff needs to start becoming specialized. Because in the end, you're getting ready for not more education. You're getting ready to actually go into some form of professional endeavor. And if you're not doing something that is going to be like where you could actually go up to a job and say, hey, I want to do this, and they'll look at you and say, okay, well, where's your experience? If you don't have that experience, they don't want you. When I got to my first job and I handed them my papers, like, here's my diploma. The guy took it, looked over, and threw it to the side and said, I don't care about that. Show me your demo reel. Thankfully, because I did a lot of side projects, I had a demo reel. And I got the job. I know other people that did not have a demo reel. It didn't go so well for them. So, yeah, study is important, but it's more important to know what it is that you're kind of going into and then to prepare for it. Are you going to be working in construction? Well, better start learning how to build with stuff, with not just equations and book stuff. You start building stuff with your hands. Are you going into chemistry? You might as well start experimenting. Find some things around. It's like, you know what? I want to see what, I want to try and figure out like electroplating. And then you figure that sort of stuff out. There's many different things you can do to practice your craft for the future and have it benefit your education. But I tell you what, if your free time only gets used on trivial things, it's going to come back and bite you later on. Play is good, but too much, and it eats into all of your free time, and it destroys a lot of your future. I'm not saying that lightly. I've seen a lot of people who have wasted opportunity, including myself, that in retrospect would have been a lot easier if one had just put more focus into their projects. It's actually one of the reasons why I really leaned into streaming, is that it gave me opportunity to explore some projects and find the motivation to actually do it. They don't teach that in school. And I understand why. It doesn't usually end up in making the school money. What it does do is it gives agency over each person in their field and their expertise. If you were to go out and do an internship, besides gen ed classes, the college won't teach you anything what you need. You will learn everything you need from that internship. But just for that one job. What college does is it allows you to prepare yourself for a variety of different environments. But it still has to be paired with the real world. And that's the one thing that colleges currently are lacking. And some colleges are starting to figure out how to break through and starting to realize, hey, we need to fix this. But not a whole lot are doing that just yet. One of the best projects I got to work on when I was at college, I've still yet to actually see it materialize. But I spent dozens of hours over my time at college working on these projects. And one of the things that it taught me was how to do publishing. Designs for publishing. So it'd be something like, hey, learning how to use InDesign. We did not have a class that you could learn InDesign with. And I learned a whole lot by working on projects using that. So as a result, now I have ideas for how to publish books. I did not know how to do that, and there was no class to teach that. Greetings there, Enigmatic. How you doing? How is your family? Good. We have made it home to the village. Excellent. Hopefully your kid is doing well. You've been traveling for quite a bit there, so hopefully this is an opportunity for you all to finally rest a little bit and to kind of reset. Always blessed, indeed. There are a couple of family members I have that have been going fishing the last couple of days. I have not had that ability to do so, just because of the schedules. It just was not a good year for being able to do that. And so I don't think I'll actually be able to get down and pull that off, which is honestly not necessarily a terrible thing. I do it more for the social aspect, mostly because I don't really have freezer space to really justify getting a whole lot of fish. But it is a good way to be able to bond with family members and whatnot. Maybe next year I'll do that. But apparently the fishing this year is, at least down in the Kenai, is pretty good. For those who have never been to Alaska, fishing is a huge part of our culture up here. But I have noticed that apparently the number of tourists to go fishing is actually way less this year. I've heard that there's been a huge drop, and I think it might be because of prices, which is understandable. Cost of travel has gone up, and a lot of people don't have the flexibility like they've had in previous years. So we'll see. Maybe that will actually help the fishing population actually to grow even more. Hopefully. But it's definitely doing a number on our economy up here. Well, I want to try and get Pharaoh and the Smith published sometime next week. Well, it's not like publishing, but it's going to be like it's like an experimental publishing, and that's going to be on the website. When that comes out, I'll promote it. But it should be a very interesting story. It's one I very much have been wanting to tell for a long time. Gotta run. God bless. Same to you. Hope that your family heals and that you have a good opportunity to enjoy the rest of the summer. Thanks for stopping by, Enigmatic. By the way, to the folks that are curious about such things, I was on a very interesting stream the other day. I got to go over and participate in a discussion about Sasquatch and Bigfoot. And that happened over with the channel After the Weekend. And it was a fun stream to do. I got to tell some stories, and we got to talk about kind of a very corny film, but it was still a good discussion all the same. But that was last Saturday, if I remember right. I'm going to be having like a collection of like the best streams. I'll be posting them onto the website. I don't have the Alaska Man Jeff section of that website operational yet, but there is going to be an area on there where it will have stuff like that. There was a guy I got to hear on a stream a while back. Sorry, not a stream, just a regular YouTube video. And he had a very interesting conundrum that he was trying to deal with. And it had to do with being black-pilled. Now, if you're familiar with the term red pill, then this is a very similar sort of thing. But it harkens to people that are getting discouraged. And there's a lot of things to get discouraged about. And I'm not trying to say that you can overlook discouragement. I would be one of the last people to say that, because it can get very overwhelming at times. But here's the thing. There is always hope, even if it doesn't feel like it's there. Trying to wait for that hope to kind of materialize is very difficult. And this guy was mentioning about how he's gotten black-pilled over the last couple of months. And while I can't necessarily fault him for that, it is interesting how people start to connect material gain with whether or not something is good or not. And for him, it was based upon material sort of needs and whatnot. So what happens if you start getting discouraged? What are some strategies to try and disconnect from that? Well, one of the best things to do is to try and find ways to engage family and friends face to face. Now that's harder to do nowadays because so many people are online, but it's still possible. I remember hearing about this a while back, that there was a guy who was just kind of desperate for any sort of friendships that he could be able to find. And he went out all the time to try and find a friend group. But he couldn't. And I thought that was kind of a weird situation. If he was going out all the time, why does that happen? Well, then it kind of started happening to me. And I realized, dang, it actually, our culture has made it very, very difficult to try and interact with people in the real world. One of the hardest things they have to overcome is the realization that people have busy lives and our schedules are all over the place. There's no way to be able to tell one way or the other at times what a person's schedule is. There was some folks when I was back at college, for example. This was before social media really took over. It was in the process of getting started, but it wasn't the nightmare that we have today. And even so, we were having a heck of a time trying to organize things with folks. We'd be like, hey, we want to be able to do something together, and it never could happen. Well, lo and behold, a lot of it was for a reason. And it wasn't just our schedules. A lot of it also had to do with discouragement. People would go to an event, it wouldn't turn out very well, and they felt like their time was wasted. So thus, they never did it again. So if that happened to one person, that's fine. But it started having a domino effect, and more people started to lean into that. Over the years, we finally got to the point where almost nobody would show up to stuff. And in some places, that is still the case. Now, granted, there are still a lot of folks that will still engage and whatnot, but I have found it interesting how the moment one person stops showing up, that means that somebody else is probably not going to show up either. Because there's always going to be somebody who is infected because of their friend. So them and their friend go off and do something else. Well, somebody else was connected to those people, so they get discouraged, and thus the domino effect takes place. It takes the ability to withstand that and say, I'm going to hold on as much as possible and try and interact with folks regardless. But how do you do that in the modern day? It may be easier when you're at college, but what do you do when you're out of college? Well, that's where the black pilling guy kind of came into the story, because he was having a heck of a time trying to interact with anybody. And so thus he went onto YouTube and he ranted. I won't share the guy's channel because honestly, he's somebody I think is in deep bitterness. And that's not necessarily a good source to try and find wisdom or whatnot. And it starts to become your own sort of pain. But it was interesting to see. And he had a very common saying that he said throughout his videos. He would usually start with a curse of some kind and then say, "I'm so lonely." He would curse again and say, "So bitter." And he went through this list of being lonely, bitter, angry. And after a while, you're like, this guy needs help. But the problem is that no one knows who he is or where he is. All we know is that he's somebody who's hurting. So why do I bring this guy up? Because he was somebody who, as I understand, got discouraged. He would go to things and nothing would ever happen. So he started building up walls. If you spend your whole life building walls, eventually you're going to find that you have walled yourself in. And that becomes very hard to dismantle because you are your own worst enemy and you know the things that weaken you, and thus the things that you start to wall become almost impenetrable, you could say. The wall becomes of your own making. But it doesn't start that way. Somebody else put down the first bricks of that wall. They even helped you move it. They either put them there intentionally or they helped you move them there. So that's how it tends to start. But then once you have that wall built, how do you break it? Well, the same way that you built it, one brick at a time, slowly but surely breaking down that wall. For the guy on YouTube, he's very bitter. He wants a friend group. He wants the feeling of community, but he doesn't have it. So for someone like that, it becomes the question of, okay, well, how do we get you to the first positive public engagement? Well, if you're to ask him, which this is the reason why I've watched his videos, because it's a fascinating study into the heart of a black-pilled man. Because in his world, he thinks that the only way to change things is by getting exactly what he wants. But that's not going to make him better. If anything, it's going to make him worse. So you have to get a positive interaction. One where you don't necessarily get what you want, but you get an opportunity to find out how to give and take. If you can't figure that part out, it becomes a lot harder to try and fix other things. So you have to be willing to learn the very, very difficult process of rejecting yourself. Once you figure that part out, a lot of other things start becoming more manageable. They don't necessarily go away, but they become more manageable. They become more... you start to be able to see the strategies in which you can start to break things down yourself. But now we come to the other problem. And now this is the thing that I actually have some personal experience in. So I've learned how to break down parts of the wall. There are some things, though, that are so heavy, so big, you need help. And those are the parts of my wall, personally, that I can't figure out how to budge. But I do know it's a group effort. Because you can only tear down so many parts. And then you're like, okay, what else can I even move? Well, it's that one part that both you and another person put there to begin with. And it will take you and another person to get rid of. That's where I think that people become doomers start to come about from. They get discouraged. They look at their life and they're like, I can't fix this. And then they start to put back the bricks. And the guy that was on YouTube did this. He started breaking out. And then he crossed a certain age and he was like, nothing's ever changing. And he started feverishly putting the brick wall up again. Then he became cynical. After that point, I stopped watching because I'm like, this guy has lost so much and he is so bitter. There's no way of being able to reach him right now. Not like he was even reading any of the chats to begin with, because I tried to offer some bits of wisdom, but he would not listen to it. And turned out he actually made a video where he actually made a statement where someone had been DMing him asking why he never answers chat. And he said, well, because I refuse to read it. See, someone tore him down years ago and he chose never to actually read it again. It's kind of interesting that he chooses to publish stuff online. But it's part of the bitterness. It's the desire for other people to feel your pain. And for him, that seems like the only logical option for him. Come on. There we go. I accidentally pressed the wrong button there. So if you know somebody that's like that, it is actually very important to help them break out of that. You know, I know somebody like that, and I can't get a hold of him anymore. I'm not sure why, except the fact that maybe, just maybe, he's starting to find that putting up walls becomes easier, and he's more willing to do it. You can only warn people so much before it's like, okay, we've crossed points of not necessarily no return, but areas that are going to become very hard to return from. Words can hurt, and some of the people I know in my life that are the deepest into the black pill sort of culture are the ones who have been injured by word in ways that they never thought possible. They love to brag. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I'm tough. I can take it. And then someone looks at them and gives the one word they can't deal with. The one word that breaks them. So that raises a question. What word would break you? I've thought about that. What word would break me? And, you know, I think I've heard it. And, I gotta say, the damage is very hard to fix. So what if you get a black pillar who hears the one thing that they dread the most, and suddenly they become so discouraged that they just decide that's it, and they cut off everybody? Well, they've started to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and their black pilling suddenly materializes as a result of their doing. But you can't tell them that, because a lot of black pillars, they've been told to expect that. Oh, someone's going to tell you that you're the reason that this has happened. And thus, it pushes them even further down that black pill path. So how do you connect to them? Well, I think the best way to do it is to just merely engage them. Start out small. Just be positive around them. Try and be encouraging. There was a guy that I knew where he was becoming a black pill man right in front of me. And people were taking advantage of him. They were humiliating him. And he was about ready. He just about had it. And finally, he just lashed out and left. And people were like, oh, I'm so glad we don't have to deal with that anymore. It's like, folks, if you were in that position, how would you feel? Oh, I'd be able to tough it out. That guy was a weakling. Once we hear the one word that would break us, sure, beforehand we feel like we can take on the world. Then we hear that one word that we dread. And then suddenly, everything collapses. And we no longer feel like we can take it all on. So try and be an encouragement whenever possible. Not blind encouragement, of course. Because that doesn't actually help anybody. But being kind, considerate, still helps. You know, some of the best communities I've come across are all nerds. I remember seeing them when I was first in college, and I got told basically, oh, don't go sit at the nerd table. They're a bunch of idiots. And I went over, and just to spite the people that said that, I sat down at the nerd table. Little did I know that was going to be a point where they would ostracize me because of that, and they would leave me there. And I was like, oh, well, okay, well, here I am, and I accepted my fate. But it is interesting to realize just how different everyone treated me the moment I did that. But I was surprised how welcoming people were at the nerd table. Some of the strongest communities right now are all in that nerd faction. And gotta say, there's a lot that I think average people can learn from nerd communities because of that. There, I was wondering what was going on there. That could be interesting. Kind of like that coloration. Oh, we'll run with that one. All right, lock that, and now let's add in some shading. Actually, no, we want another layer. Kind of has that Moby Dick sort of white whale sort of look to it. So I mentioned about the nerd community, and the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because I learned so much about community building from them. Things that I never saw in any other community I've been a part of. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize that. I came across somebody who I never would have put in nerd culture. And lo and behold, they were actually very big into that world. And you know what? They had community. The people that don't have community really don't have any sort of nerd culture. And, because of that, they're relying upon, like, they want a small town sort of feel, and they can't find it nowadays. So, really, the nerd world is a good way to find that. And so thus, it is interesting to see the barriers between those that are nerds and those that kind of ridiculed them for a long time. It's starting to fade, and now you're actually seeing everyone having a little bit of nerd culture. It is quite comical to see that transformation, including with people that I never would have thought would have actually become nerds. Some of them were big ridiculers of them. That doesn't necessarily mean that the nerd culture is like perfect or anything like that. But what it does show is that there's something that every community can teach you. And if you're willing to listen, you might actually learn some things that you can take with you elsewhere. One of the things I would love to try and find out how to do is to find ways to do more community building. But trying to do it with like average folks, really hard. Very hard, but you know what's really easy is to get a bunch of nerds together. So that might actually be the best option. Figure out how to get some nerds together and then slowly start opening up the doors to other folks. It will help to give the nerds an opportunity to feel like they're part of a regular society, and gives people that are part of regular society the opportunity to find that community that has been long since damaged by our culture. This has become a very interesting design. I haven't done drawings like this in a long time, and this is the second one I've done like this. I kind of want to do even more, but I'm not going to. There's too many other things to try and do right now, but I'm going to be putting this stuff on the back burner of projects to do when there's some flexibility once again. By the way, if you find anything of merit around here, would you consider pressing the like button, comment if you so desire, and if you don't find this stuff interesting, then feel free to put down a downvote. I'll accept that, and I'll try and improve things in the future. But if you leave a comment, you'll also be able to give me some ideas about how to improve as well. Try and keep them civil. We've had a couple of people that like nothing more than to just offer negative criticism, which I don't talk about a whole lot, but it is worth bringing up every now and again. There are some people in this world that only give negative criticism. And if you want someone to improve, you give them constructive criticism. You'll say, hey, it'd be better if you did this. But if you just come up and say, hey, this was terrible, don't do that ever again, of course, the cheap viewer shows up right when I'm starting to talk about this nonsense. Okay. Banned. Anyway, if you just have criticism, then that's not really wanting to see someone improve. It's wanting to kind of trying to one-up somebody. Trying to tear them down in the disguise of being constructive. I've seen that happen to a couple of folks, and it really, really doesn't help. If anything, it makes people want to double down even more. Now, that's not necessarily me, but I have met people where that is literally what transpires in their life. They get bitter and they double down. And so if you're trying to improve things, that is something always worth considering. It has a Japanese flair to it. It's very interesting. All right. Oh, there's one last spot up here that I forgot. So here's another question. Let's say that, my apologies as well to anybody who's watching this on the replay, which it doesn't happen a whole lot, but I do know that there is the rare occasion that does happen. So when you hear me say things like this, I ask questions, and sometimes they're rhetorical. Sometimes kind of wonder if anybody out there has like thoughts on the matter. And so I do ramble a lot, and so I find myself rambling sometimes too much. And right now I kind of feel like I'm entering into that category. But here's a question in terms of community building. Have you ever noticed that there are some people in this world where they have the opportunity to join a community and they don't? And then you go up and ask them, hey, what is the reason? And they say there's no point. We've just come across is somebody who's a black pillar, somebody who believes that there is no opportunity to try and to fix things. And so they just resign themselves to a life of confusion and frustration. So the question comes down to, if you know somebody in your life that is like that, do you know what would potentially get their attention long enough to give them the opportunity to open up to being connected into that community? Greetings there, Bastian. How you doing? Oh, yeah. It was hello and good night. Anyway, rest well, sir. Do some inverted ice up here. So there was a guy that I knew who was in that camp of somebody who didn't know how to connect, and I tried to help him out, and I was not very successful. And he ended up kind of pushing me away along with everybody else that he was around. But it was interesting to see him and see how his life was being affected. Well, as time went on, I got a chance to do it again. And there was a guy who I got a chance to try to connect with, and it actually started to work. Not entirely. it did help out a little bit. And it was a guy who wasn't necessarily black-pilled or cut off yet, but he was somebody that was starting to go down that path. And I didn't necessarily save him from it, but it's more like I was somebody who was there for him to be able to reach out when he started to lose his, when he started to feel discouraged and started to fall apart. Well, it was a point where he suddenly realized, after years of feeling like he was special and unique, when it finally clicked in his mind that nobody liked him. And suddenly, he went from being feeling like the most popular guy to feeling completely like trash, because people had been mocking him the whole time, and it finally clicked in his brain what was going on. It was a shame because it was pretty obvious to many, but he was unable to see it. Well, I had the opportunity to actually engage him, and I ended up being one of his only friends moving on from that point. Sure, he wasn't necessarily a close friend, but it was something where I remember very distinctly the moment when it finally clicked in his head that the community he thought he was a part of was no longer there, and thus I was there along with some other guys to be his next community, and it panned out decently, and he's actually turned out to be a fine fella. Not necessarily because of what we did, but we were there to offer assistance to somebody who was in a time of need, and community will do that for you. But you know what won't do that is a business. And a lot of people start to treat the businesses almost like it is their community, whether it's the place they work, whether it's a shop, whether it's an entertainment area like a bowling alley or something like that. They start to treat that like that is their community, when really what a community is the people in that community. If the people there are engaging, it doesn't matter what you're doing, it gives you the opportunity to feel like you belong and feel like you're valued. But if you don't have that community to begin with, that's very hard to be able to pull off. So for the guy that was in question for this story, he tried doing something like just wanting to watch a movie with folks. He invited many folks over, and he thought he was going to have around 30 people show up because he felt like he was that popular. And in the end, no one showed up. Not a single person. But people did show up beforehand for something else, and that was where I showed up into that. Now, I didn't have I had a very busy schedule. I wasn't going to be able to stay around. But I did notice that I was the last person at the event. I thought, wow, this guy thought he had everything, and that was the moment that I realized this guy needs help. But what if you're in that sort of position and there's no one there to offer you assistance? Well, that, again, where the story originally began here, that's where a lot of the blackpilling starts to come from. And that's where it's important to try to say, hey, if you're the one who's in need, the best way you can start to break free of that is to help others. Especially people that maybe are in the same camp as you. Just being someone that you can be able to chat with and say, hey, I have been there, or I am there as well. Let us try and find a way through this together. Struggle will never disappear, no matter what stage of life you're in. And it's up to you to be able to at least help those in your community to fare better. But you need a community to really get a chance to feel that opportunity being possible. There are 1,001 reasons not to engage others. Heaven knows that I've had many times where I could have done something and I didn't. But some people have that. For some people, that comes more naturally than others. And if you're somebody that it does come naturally, that is something where do not discount the impact you can have. Because you never know, there might actually be a massive impact you can have on people's lives. And it may not seem like it at first, but thus it is so. I'm not going to be making perfect ice over here. I just want to get the general feel because it's going to be blurred. Actually, I want a brush for this one. It's not quite what I was expecting. Maybe a little bit's fine, but oh well. Let's focus more on the blurring. almost done with this one, then we'll move on to the next thing. Maybe. It is getting a little later, so this was an experiment anyway. It's just for the sake of it. What's the time for the stream right now? 1:30. Yeah, we're not gonna do anything else. We'll call this one good after this. I know it's a shorter stream, but just a reminder, we're going to have a longer stream that comes up. Right now, it looks like it's going to be in 2 weeks. It will be on a Saturday, and it will go on for probably about 6 to 8 hours. It's going to be a long day. It's one of the few times I'm actually going to do this. It's going to be like a very irregular sort of thing. If it goes well, then we might do some more, but it's not going to be a main focus. And I do realize that there isn't much point at times to do. Well, let me put it this way. I've known some people that try and do super long streams, all with the intent of trying to get subscribers or whatnot. And I have seen it. I've seen it destroy them. It makes them broken in many ways. And so you're never really going to see me like all that interested in wanting to try and do it, because like the 24-hour streams, while I could do it, it would have absolutely no purpose, and it would be honestly a problem with pride, I would say. So you're not going to see me really all that interested in wanting to pull that off. But it is something where I'm willing to give longer streams a try. You just won't see me doing the 24 or 48 hour streams or the 72-hour streams, which some people have tried. And yes, they get wildly famous for that. And I also see the physical harm that happens to them. And I'm like, nope. I know enough about how this world works to know that this is a potential problem point. It's almost like sticker quality. I'll have to think about that. Kind of a weird thing to make a sticker over. But anyway, we're going to be calling it there. There's only one person over on the Twitch side. Let me see if anybody's up on the Twitch side. Otherwise, like, that can be rated, and I'll just rate myself with that group. There's one person over on the Rumble side, maybe. It might be a bot. It's hard to tell. My apologies, folks. But I've gotten so burned with bots over the last couple of years, I just naturally assume that they're bots. No, not really. Okay, let's just call it there. Thanks for coming by for those that did, and we'll see you next time. Tomorrow we're going to be doing some... What is on the schedule for tomorrow? Is it actually going to be the Blender Challenge? Or is that... No, Blender Challenge is August 1st, so that's next week. Okay, so tomorrow is Fortnite. Week after is going to be the Blender Challenge. Anyway, have a very pleasant evening and morning, everybody. Be civil to one another whenever possible, and encourage each other to be more civil. Heaven knows we need it. Anyway, we'll call it there. Till next time, everybody, have a very pleasant evening.